South Africa has a very special place in my heart, or what we should be calling it, spectacular South Africa. I'll explain why. But partly, this is a magical place to make wine in South Africa. When you arrive, it's like God created the perfect wine-growing wonderland. There's magical climate, perfect for grapes, the Cape Doctor, this famous wind that comes in and acts as a sort of cleanse for all the vines that are in towards Stellenbosch. And lots of different diverse places as well. There's very cool climate regions. Elgin, we're going to go there. And then you go to the Northern Cape, we're going to go to there. And it's a desert. There's loads of places. But I have this cousin, a long time ago. He was the world's oldest bungee jumping priest. And he was from South Africa. And he jumped from it was the cable car at Table Mountain. And he did it for charity, I think in his 80s, well into his 80s. He was quite big as well. He sort of left his 2 walking sticks and sort of keeled over out there. And it's called Father Austin Collingwood, and he joined the priesthood quite late in life. And he'd been an architect. So if you go to Holy Trinity Church in Durban, he was the architect, or one of the 2 architects who designed it. There you go. Why we're talking about South Africa? Spectacular South Africa. Put in the hashtag Spectacular South Africa, and you'll see everyone tonight is enjoying wines from Spectacular South Africa. And there's a reason why. South Africa had the most firm sort of lockdown, particularly for a wine industry, and you couldn't harvest anything, you couldn't transport anything, and you couldn't sell anything domestically or internationally. Completely shut down the industry, and it was ruinous. Now the restrictions have eased. People have been able to harvest stuff. Bear in mind, though, that often the harvesters, we think of wine producers, we often think of the owners, people who own these. The harvesters themselves were often one person who might support 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 other people. So whole families were facing ruin unless the industry could get back. Fortunately, it has. A lot of wine producers have been producing special kits, there's sort of food or medicine or help, short-term help for people who are in distress. Now they're back harvesting again. Alcohol sales are moving, but slowly. What we need to do is to drink lots of South African wine, to empty the shelves, so there's lots of space for it to come back to. And we're going to go and have a few here, courtesy of 2 chums. Nick Darlington, there he is on screen. Nick is one of the 2 directors of a company called the Graft Wine Company. He started a business called Red Squirrel. We're going to come up to that in a minute. He was a scuba diving instructor, a management consultant. He worked in politics and journalism, and then got into wine, obviously, just how you do. And there's also David Knott. David set up this very funky business called Knotted Vine, and really cutting edge, fab business going and making wines. And the 2 of them have come together to create the Graft Wine Company. They import wine from around the world, but one of their specialisms is South Africa. And we're going to start off with this wine. It's called Eekhoring. I'm almost certainly pronounced that wrong. It means squirrel in Afrikaans. Red Squirrel, Nick's whole business. Eekhoring Squirrel. And it's a collaboration. They've brought it together. This is Eekhoring Wit. Eekhoring Wit, I guess. At £16. Mostly made of Chenin Blanc. I've got some notes down here. There's some other alternative varieties. It's got Grenache Blanc and Marsanne in it, making it really interesting kind of blend. And it comes mostly from Swartland, where these old vines, not necessarily sexy grape varieties, but now people have discovered they used to make brandy out of them. They get fab, concentrated, dense, really classy fruit. And it really is. It's different as well. There's a lot of fruit, but there's also lots of mineral tang. There's grapefruit zestiness in it. Chenin often has an appley character, and it's there. Nice crunchy apple. We're going to come back to apples a little bit later on. Crisp. The thing I think about Swartland is you get these textures, layers of it, and they make great food wines. Bear that in mind, because we're going to come back to that a little bit later on. Touch floral. Oh, it's beautiful. Waxy. That's waxy. Now, you have no excuse to not go and get some of today's wines. I've got a list down here, but Curious Liquors Glasgow, The Old Garage Cornwall, Luvians and St Andrews, Flagship Wines in St Albans, Source Market London, Good Wine Shop in London, Grape Escape in Cheltenham. I'm not going to go through them all, or I am going to come down to there's Dorset Wine Company in Dorchester and Tipsy Merchant in Budley Salterton, a place I only know because of Giles Wembley Hogg, that Radio 4 comedy. He comes from Budley Salterton. So there's loads. We've got them all down here. There's somewhere near you. Even if you're in Abergavenny, you can go to Chester's. Even if you can't find any of them Feel Good Grapes online, you can go and buy it there. So go and buy some of these wines, because we've got everybody covered today. Lots and lots of indies. Support your indies with South African wine, sporting at the same time. Let me tell you about spectacular South Africa. I must have just enjoyed this a little bit. It's a campaign, there's no budget. It's just to give exposure to producers who are having a really rough time, which is why I quite like it as a campaign. This isn't some kind of glossy thing with lots of celebrities, getting behind it. Because exports are now running, we're now in a position to start saying, let's go and fill the coffers a little bit. South African wines has some bits and pieces. Go and look online. If you look on hashtag, there's a couple of other hashtags. If you look on hashtag Spectacular South Africa, you will see people hosting tastings. There's some short videos from producers, which are utterly fascinating. And you can also hashtag support South Africa, drink South African wine. There's lots. I'm just going to go with Spectacular South Africa because it is. We filmed there, Series 1. Absolutely magical time. Brilliant fun. Beautiful weather, great people, lots of fun. And we went from all these diverse climates. We went to the sea, thought we were going to go and get hypothermia. It was so cold, even though it was like in the middle of summer. And then you go out into the desert, and it's really, really roasting hot. The director, Ed, lost his phone, and then somehow, by total miracle, found it, like in the middle of nowhere, out in the Karoo. God knows how that was. It was a brand new iPhone as well when they'd just come out. All right, Ed, nice to see you. No, it's really delicious. Eekhoring. It's different from Chardonnay. It's different from Loire Chenins. It's fruity, but it has that zestiness of the old world. It's glorious stuff. Right. Matthew Van Heerden, MVH, signature Chardonnay. This one's got a cork, so I'm going to give myself a little twiddle with my Coravin. So that way I can give the bottle away to somebody in our NHS or care services, because I've not opened it, so it can be disinfected. Matthew comes from this long line of farmers in KwaZulu-Natal. He was Young Winemaker of the Year, was it? IWSC. He's had lots of winemaking awards. I think I've even put some of them down here. South African Young Winemaker of the Year with Diners Club International. But he's really into Elgin. Elgin's a magical place. This is properly classy. Now, this is £36-ish. Again, we'll have loads of bits down here. But it's very, very stylish Chardonnay. There's stone fruit. And honey. And a zesty splice that runs through it. I don't know, quite, my language is losing me. But it's got this oak that integrates really well. There's lots of new oak that's sort of seriously classy. Now, if you like white Burgundy, you're going to love this. If you like the newer style of zesty California top flight Chardonnay, you're going to absolutely love it. Like Australia's really top Chardonnays, but this is South African really top flight Chardonnay. Elgin's this bit down on the coast. It's a really tragic story that's named after a little girl called Elgin, I think it was. It was Elgin Harold. And she was bitten by a snake and died. And her father said, I want to name this area after her, because he was so devastated, understandably. And so that's who it's named after. It's also the home of appletiser. And often you get this thing that vines grow very well, where there's apples, cherries, there's pears, there's certain species that can grow quite closely together. So it made its name making appletiser, and there's an apple museum, I think, in Elgin somewhere. And then people have realised it's great for cool climate, zesty, knitted, tight Chardonnays. But with this lovely fruit, there's actually an element of kind of honeyed peach that's in there as well. It's subtle. And, the balanced, long, intense complex, it's all of those things. Beautiful balance between fruit and freshness. Sits on the palate for a long time. When we say there's those intense fruit flavours, actually there's more than I can name, but they're very precise, and there's lots of things going on. You sort of sit and contemplate it over time. Oh, that's good. I seem to remember when we went to South Africa, somebody said Elgin was one of the first places that pioneered, I think with Fandi vineyards, it was one of the first places that pioneered black ownership of vineyards as part of this new nation being born, and it was where a lot of that happened. So it's an interesting part of the world and very cool. It's also not far from Ben Lomond. one of the three, four wine-grown Ben Lomans around the world, not the one in Scotland. And there's that bit that's out there. Is it called Danger Point? And it was where there's a ship went down, and it's the first. It was famously, people shouted "women and children first," and all these soldiers died. They're mostly Scottish, I think, and that's why they called it Ben Lomond, because they saw this mountain that they rode towards with the women and children. And the story goes, it might be a bit further away. Remember, the story goes that there's gold buried in the hills that had come from the SS something or other. It's somewhere in the back of my mind, but I do seem to remember it's Danger Point. You get sharks off there. Oh, that is really good. That is Red Squirrel Online, Vine and Graham in Beverley. Hello, Beverley. Amazing cathedral. And Grape Escape in Cheltenham. Now, Nick's got this other campaign, and I think this next wine is going to be particularly suitable for that. Nick himself came up with the Great British Braai-Off. A braai. So tomorrow and Sunday, you have to have a braai. South African barbecue. It's not really, it's a braai, it's a totally different thing. So look at Twitter and Instagram at Braai-Off, BRAAI off. Hashtag GB Braai-Off. It's a national campaign to get the public braaiing with a bottle of fine South African wine, and post your efforts on social media. I'm going to have to do this. We're going to go and have a bit of this. So he's going to go and get some chefs. There is a website, actually, greatbritishbraai-off.online, and you can go and see chefs and specialists going and doing their braais. We did a brilliant braai. I can see if we can get a photograph of it in a township in Philippi. And we went to one of these sort of braai places on Friday nights. Oh, I've never eaten so much sausage in all my life. I am quite fortunate. There's a South African butcher just over the back. I'm going to nip round later and get some sausages. And we're going to have a braai. Yeah. Oh, what's he sent me? Lowerland, De Verloy Bokoi, number 6 NV. NV. My Afrikaans is terrible, but that's the key. This is a non-vintage wine. It's based around a couple of vintages. I think I've got some notes down here of what vintages it was. Based around 2017, 2018. And there's a guy called Bertie Coetzee, who represents the 6th generation of his family in Lowerland. Now, Lowerland is in the Northern Cape. So this is desert. It's like the 29th degree of latitude, 28 and 50. The wine grows between the 28th degree and the 50th degree. So when you get towards 28, 29, and when you get towards sort of 49, 50, you are at the outer limits, really, of where you can go and make wine. And this is in the sort of, but it's very high up. It's about 1,000 metres high. It is a blend, Syrah, Merlot, Cabernet Sauvignon, Petit Verdot. It's actually surprisingly light, and it's not massively alcoholic as well. It's sort of 12 and a bit, nearly 13. You'd think it would be really big and hot and blowy. But it's not. It's a mid-framed, dry fruit. Until it comes from somewhere warm. Dry fruity, but restrained. It's not opulent and juicy. It's slightly, almost kind of weirdly rony, in a way. The Syrah component is certainly. You got so much Merlot and Cabernet Sauvignon. It's not in any way like a Syrah, like a Rhone wine, but there's something about the sort of dry, mid-weight tannins to it. That is delicious. Sometimes these wines come, I thought that would be really delicious. I thought that would be, top flight white. I thought this was going to be great fun, £16, interesting, quirky Chenin. But I had no idea what it was going to be like. The Lowerland de Verloy Bokoi. Now, I shouldn't be surprised, because there's a little note in here. It says that the last release of that was chosen as a hidden gem in this. Platter's Wine Guide. Now, this is Platter 2019, it was Platter 2018. If you are into South African wine, you want to get into South African wine, this is kind of the guide. This is the thing to go and look for. He's got lovely notes. He's not just tasting notes, he tells you a bit about, guys like Bertie. So he gives you some sort of insight into who they are and what they do. All of these wines, with the exception of Eekhoring, because I don't think that's registered, but all the other ones we're trying, all are sort of slightly kind of, you've got to go and try this wines in Platter's Guide, because I had a dig through beforehand and did my little notes. So it does really well in there. It's a sort of eucalyptus cedary thing, which I remember reading on the notes, but I can't get that. But it's this mid-weight, fragrant framing. That's a great barbecue wine, I'm telling you. Quite a smart barbecue wine. It's £22, but this is about braai with a fine wine. Interestingly, Nick used to play rugby against Barnes. There's lots of South Africans in Barnes, and he said it was useful to know a bit of Afrikaans because they used to talk in Afrikaans to each other. Like my aunt, she speaks Afrikaans. So this is available. Again, it's a long list because a couple of new ones: museum wines, cask wines, Sally wines, Manchester. Hello there. Up in Manchester, we're back in Budleigh Salterton, Wolf Wine in Bath. So there's someone everywhere. And interestingly, the white wine that they make is Jancis Robinson's wine of the week. It's a Colombard. So we're in good company. Now, I know we normally only do 3 wines. I'm going to do 4. Somerset West. Well, I've got my notes here. Jacques de Clercq makes wine at Radford Dale, which I've had the wines of a lot before. This is his project. This is a bit of a gem. You are ahead of the curve if you get some Reverie Pinotage. So much so that Platter 2019 says there's this really exciting wine that Jacques de Clercq is making, but he hasn't tried it yet. Well, we're going to try it here. This is Pinotage. Now, when you've had Pinotage, you might have had it and it's been quite big and chunky and chewy. And I'm not getting into that. I actually quite like a lot of Pinotage. But what he's done here, now it comes from the cooler Vorpadeberg region, but it's carbonic maceration, so he's made it like a Beaujolais. So the idea is you sort of put the whole bunches of grapes in a big vat and you close it and you seal it off, and they start fermenting sort of spontaneously at the bottom because they get crushed and it rises, but the whole thing happens not with lots of oxygen floating around. It happens sort of in this. It brings out lots of the colour without bringing out lots of the tannin necessarily, and it makes it very aromatic, the old way you made Beaujolais, which is why Beaujolais was approachable young, because you have these bright, fruity, vibrant wines with lots of colour to them, but not necessarily lots of tannin. This is bright and crunchy, and it's got that cherryish fruit that you get from Beaujolais. This is an absolute genius. It's all that soft juiciness. It is foot stomped and basket pressed. Can't smell the feet. And then it goes into old barrels for 10 months. Hurrah! Hurrah! Seriously, Jack, you have unlocked how to make extraordinary Pinotage. I can't imagine anyone not liking this. This is seriously fine wine. You go and try really smart Beaujolais, about £33. That is in every way up there with serious, brightly fruity, properly made, interesting, quirky, multi-layered, textured, smart Gamay. Bizarre. I'd have never thought that Pinotage would go and do that. It's a conundrum of a wine, this. It's so good with a sort of bright. I was imagining South Africa, you get some big, serious Cabernets from Stellenbosch, and we're going to have some really hearty Pinotages from somewhere else. No, mid-weight framing, interesting, really drinkable, juicy wines. If you are into wine and you haven't tried that, or at least tried to get hold of it, because apparently there's not very much. There's only 350 bottles of the last vintage came in. Was it 2008? No, there's only 350 bottles of that. Get in early at Red Squirrel, Vinarius, Whiskey Exchange and Vagabond. Seriously, if you're into South Africa wine, got to go and buy that. That is an absolute corker. Can you tell I like it? Because I really do. Right, I did promise last time I'd have a couple of answers to some questions. Somebody sort of said, I have to do this in my Lancashire accent. Remember we had Love by Leou with that big Magnum? There it is. I still got it here. That fella. You can get it elsewhere. You can get it in the Whalley Wine Shop, which is what I'm doing in a Lancashire voice. Great Western Wine, Wapping Wines, Harvey Nichols, the Fine Wine Company, and the Wine App. I used to go to school very near Whalley, and we used to make fun of all the members of staff who has East Lancs accent. Sorry, I was do all like that. There's a sort of bizarre dispute about how many milks we were allowed in the morning. And there was a lady, and she used to shout. We had a regimental sergeant major who managed our breakfasts, and she used to shout, "RSM, that boy's got 2 milks." And then we would all run around going, RSM, he's got 2 milks, he's got 2 milks. Why schools are so obsessed with how many milks boys have, I've no idea at all. Michael B says, hi Joe, my wife and I are big fans from Florida. Well, hello from Florida, but you say she's from Spain. It's like, well, she's from Spain. Wondering if you have a book recommendation explaining California wines, any suggestions? I am going to suggest 2 things, actually. Go to a standard guide for the general stuff. Actually, go to Jancis Robinson's Wine Atlas, probably a really good place to start, and dig in just to get your primer. And then John Bonnet's book about the new California, and it was about new producers, because there you'll get a different perspective, if you like. Yeah, I think it was called New California Wine, something like that. John Bonnet, with an accent on his E. Kent van der Vende. Sounds like somebody in one of those Scandi dramas. I had a Cortese di Garvi, which is a very pleasant surprise. What's been your take on this wine? Well, Cortese di Garvi, if it's from Garvi, is called Garvi di Garvi, because Cortese is called Garvi if it's in the town of Garvi, in a no way confusing Italian legislative thing. You know what? I quite like it. Have this instead. I mean, I like Cortese. It was really nice. But Old Vine Whites from South Africa are the way forwards. Chris from Orlando. Chris, you email in a lot. I might have to have words about this. But you have very good questions, so I can't complain. How best to store bottles? On-side, upright, angled down towards cork. Screw caps genuinely doesn't make any difference at all. If you've got a screw cap, it really doesn't make any difference whatsoever. Corks on their side. Okay, you can be slightly angled down, but on their side. You can see all of these bits and pieces all just on their side, as long as you keep the cork wet. Rotate bottles? Yes, no. How often? No. No, don't rotate them. Even for things for a very long time, you want the sediment to settle in one place. So I don't rotate bottles at all. And in a wine cooler, how do you arrange bottles? Which on top, bottom? Well, it depends where the cool bit is. So I think the cool bit's usually on the bottom, isn't it? So you have the reds on the top and the whites on the bottom, but cooler drops because the hot air drops. And we've had some factoids. There's 2. Just to show that this is off the top of my head, Melanie Jappi, hello Melanie, who is the series producer of the wine show, gave me a very firm telling off when I started talking about Albert Berlin and the hamburger. Turns out she was nominated for a BAFTA for her television programme. I think it was nominated, wasn't it, for a BAFTA about hamburgers. And she spent a year studying hamburgers, and she says, no, Albert Berlin did not invent the hamburger. I'd read it in the Times literary supplement. I was serious. You know, Stig Abel, I'm going to write to the TLS and say, you misled me on the origins of the hamburger. Anyway, there was somebody else. I will come back and redo the hamburger later on. And Kevin the Wine Man, he says, for Rioja, Reserva, 2 years in cask, 2 years in bottle. Gran Reserva, 3 years in cask, and generally 3 years in bottle. I think it's 5 years altogether, isn't it? Spectacular South Africa. Remember, like, share, follow, whatever, subscribe, like, share, subscribe with us. Go and start tweeting your South African wines. Hashtag Spectacular South Africa. Do it and get your braai on tomorrow. It's the Great British Braai Off. Nick and all the team at Graft, thank you so much. I'll see you on Monday. I'm exhausted.